be affected, what's going to be the package and all those bits.
During that, I mean, I've come across a lot of people in HR people and management who really don't understand this consultation process bit. So basically what you're doing is you're presenting to them initially, here's our dilemma, here's the compelling reason why we're doing this, the context of what we're doing, and we're doing this for the following reasons, and then if you have any other ideas on that or any better ideas on it, please tell us about it. Is that essentially what we're talking about?
And there are many occasions when they have better ideas and they need to be put into the plan.
Okay.
Let's try and agree the solution.
Yeah, okay, fine. One of the things, we kind of skipped a part of that because we were going into that, the bit about the announcement. I know we've dealt with a whole module on this, but just in going through the sequence here, AlphaBeta are here, and we've got 410 people in the organisation. We've got something like 60 something are probably going to be affected if we do our calculations right on this. When we're announcing this, do we bring them all together the one day, all 410 into the canteen and say, guys, here's the situation, big bang stuff? Do we talk?
Yes,
I would say so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
One chance to tell them all, one chance to make an impression to what's going to happen. You're better off getting the message to everybody at the one time. Otherwise, the message gets distorted, diluted, wrong, and everything else. So if you've got something to say, get all your staff in, say what you have to say, and then move on to deal with the unions, if people are in unions, to talk to them about the consequences of what you have to say, and the staff representatives.
So with these guys here, we have them all in the canteen, we bring them in, and we stand them up, and we want to talk. Now, who talks to them?
Well, the chief executive should talk to them, and that should be the local chief executive, not somebody parachuted in. You know,
but if we see, for instance, this is a German company, and Wilhelm from Munich says, I want to talk to these people myself, and I want to get involved in this. What do you do?
Well, I think Wilhelm should come, he should wear the away jersey, and he should stand to the side of the chief executive who makes the announcement.
The
chief executive of the local operation here is the one who has the relationship with the people.
But we've seen it differently. I mean, we were dealing with one recently. It wasn't Germany, but it wasn't too far away from Germany. And the guy came over and he wanted to take responsibility for this thing here. And he came in here to go through his presentation of what he was going to say, and it would have been war.
Yeah, very noble idea. But keep him in the background, or her in the background.
Yeah.
The other thing to say,
I know, and I take your point, and we all have our national sensitivities, and some plonkers come in from the outside and they don't sort of, they sort of step on what you've achieved here. And I've seen that too. But not to use the jargon too much, but it should be the person who's the champion of the process, and who's identified as the champion of the process internally.
People know.
Who people know they should be the communicator, because that's who people are going to relate to.
Right.
Yes, there's always Wilhelms and buddies and whoever else are in the background.
Hank.
And yes, Hank, and they should all, and like all good corporate seagulls, they should all fly in and then fly out. I leave the other bit out.
Well, Peter, just finishing on that, because we talked about communication before. I think when you do the announcement, the important thing is that when they're walking out of the room for the announcement, they're given some information that they can take away and reflect on.
Well, that's it. And again,
just close that gap.
In AlphaBeta here, we were suggesting that they would do what we did in a particular organisation at one stage. Again, a really good case study of when they walked out the door, they had everything they needed. Individualised, everything needed. They had their
Wilhelm of the staff.
No, they had their tax package ready for them individually. Their pension thing worked out for them individually.
Their package
broken down individually, so they knew exactly. When they went home that evening, they knew exactly where they stood. Which brings me to the point.
I think you've got to be careful with that too, don't you? I mean, you're announcing it, but you're announcing that you're entering into a period of consultation.
I made that point earlier,
you're making
guys.
the announcement, and then you're saying we're entering into a 30-day period of consultation. So, if you have all the answers predetermined to the extent that you've gone to print, you've got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Because the purpose of the consultation, even in the Act, is actually to seek to avoid the redundancies or to mitigate the redundancies.
Yeah.
And Frank mentioned the Employment Appeals Tribunal. If you look at their website, it's full of cases where employers have been fined for lack of meaningful consultation.
Yeah, so looking, because there's a dichotomy here, which is basically, in terms of efficiency, letting people know you've thought this thing through, you've figured it out, and individually you've seen what it might mean for them. And then you have this thing of saying you're preempting. But I presume really, if you give this to everybody, you're saying if you were to volunteer for this,
sure.
If you were to volunteer, this is what it would mean. So it's not saying that we've actually singled you out. And
it's you're not targeting people to use the question you asked earlier.
It's what will be discussed during the consultation process. So
there are decisions to be made there. It's a matter of style and context. In some scenarios, given the background and the environment within which you operate, you wouldn't show all your cards up front.
But in these guys here, we give it to these lads here in AlphaBeta. We would have the thing. So they walk out the door. We've done the announcement. We talked about how you do that in a previous thing, but basically it gets to the point. It gives you an absolute, inescapable, logical reason and compelling reason as to why the thing should change. Here's exactly what we're doing, and here's the timeline. That's all you need to have in it.
Yeah.
In other words, you start off and you're saying people, you understand, and people will know at this stage there have been some issues in here. Here's the inescapable logic as why we cannot go on as we are. To address that, here's what we're doing or proposing to do, and the next here's how it's going to affect you. And then after that, then we're saying here are the next steps, and then it's out of here.
Yes.
That's right.
So it's a very uncomplicated presentation in a way, not trying to self-justify and be all this kind of sorry stuff. So you do that, then you move on to giving the people all the information you can get before they go home. Okay, that's great. So then,
And by the way, you don't make the announcement on Friday evening
why?
because you've got no control over the scenario. Managers tend to think we'll make the announcement on Friday evening, then we'll go home, play golf for the weekend, and then we'll deal with it on Monday. You make the announcement on Monday, whereby you're in the environment to manage what's going to the fallout of what you're going to say.
Great. So you have a week to pick up, to manage it. Right? Yeah.
Through your channels of management.
Through your channels of management. Then also, of course, at that stage they would know the various channels of communication that there are going to be in terms of reinforcement and all of that. There's other communication as well, which is important, or has been important as well, is communicating with other stakeholders, like for instance suppliers and customers.
Yeah. And maybe other investors or government partners.
Yeah, government and regulators and that. So you would let these people know, just let them know what's happening, the rationale and what's happening.
Yes.
And then of course there's the media. And increasingly, unless it's very large, the media are not taking much of an interest these days. Unless it's a very large announcement, they take a certain amount of interest in it.
It doesn't have the same impact.
Doesn't have the same impact
because of the times we live in.
But that is something that in facing media, because most managers in this situation don't have a lot of experience in dealing with media, and there's an emotional time. So actually, really, I'd say to people at that stage, they do need preparation, specialist preparation, no question about it. And you certainly don't want to be formulaic about the way you go through it. You could be formulaic, but actually being formulaic about how you say it on the radio or television or in the media, print media, just looks as if you don't care. So there's a specialty there.
That was a very interesting point. Just on the recent Pfizer announcement, I heard the guy in the news, the Vice President Operations, can't remember his name, but I heard him on the news, I heard him on the TV, I saw him at his formal announcement, and he wasn't formulaic. He said it 5 different ways.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
He said what he had to say.
So he genuinely felt it, or he said what he felt. Okay, great stuff. Then, looking then, it comes down then after consultation was taking place, and these guys in AlphaBeta at this stage know about between 50 and 60 people are going to be leaving the organisation. Now it's down to who. How do we manage that? We've got guys down who are going to say who's going to leave.
Well, I suppose initially, the trend is that there would be a voluntary severance process before there would be any involuntary redundancies. So I think the company would design a voluntary scheme, launch it, and sell it to their staff and manage the take-up. I think there's a few things to bear in mind, and it will depend on the company. But first of all, because it's a voluntary scheme, they can attach certain conditions to it. They can say that it's not available for certain staff who are crucial to the future of the business. They can say that they reserve the right to refuse certain applications because of skills levels. They can determine the manner and time in which people will go. They say, certain people might leave, but you go in 3 months' time because we want you to perform certain duties before you go. Yeah. So a scheme needs to be designed having regard to the particular requirements of the individual business here.
And in terms of designing it as well, in terms of the package you put together, statutory is statutory, and if you're entitled to it, you're entitled to it. But on the ex gratia side, you have to go and look at either what you've paid before, if you've done it before, in terms of your precedent, but also take soundings from the marketplace for your comparators as to what's an appropriate rate of ex gratia payment.
Yes.
In some industry sectors it wouldn't enter into construction, ex gratia wouldn't feature. In others, financial services, telecommunications, etc.
It's quite high. Yeah.
And tell me this, outplacement as well, big deal. In this case, Frank, here, would you give them outplacement?
I'd put support structures in place. It's in our interests.
A lot of people aren't now at the moment. There's less of it happening, I think.
Yeah. It's a cost issue for some people. But I think, the point about
in the design of the process, if outplacement is deemed to be, and that's what people want, or there's a need, I'd include it. I wouldn't exclude, I'd put in what is a fair and reasonable structure to assist people in, I hate to use that great euphemism, transition, but to get another job.